attention to Crystal Mitchell, 30 years old, sliding down a hallway wall in a San Diego apartment complex, covering her eyes with trembling hands. She has less than 10 minutes left to live. Because Raymond McCloud, 33, a former Marine with a history of violence spanning 3 marriages, is watching her every move. On this day, Crystal dreamed of enjoying a romantic weekend getaway. On this day, McCloud had already decided she would never leave that building alive. This is the story of how one woman's death sparked a manhunt that would span 6 years, multiple countries, and transform a grieving mother into one of the most relentless amateur detectives in American criminal history.
The boyfriend was nowhere to be found.
I decided to take matters into my own hands.
Now her grieving mother, Josephine, a former detective, turns back into a sleuth to join the manhunt for Crystal's killer.
Crystal Mitchell wasn't supposed to be in San Diego that June weekend in 2016. The single mother of 2 had planned a quiet summer in Vancouver, Washington, where her children were visiting their grandmother, Josephine. But love, or what she thought was love, had pulled her south for a last-minute trip with her new boyfriend, a man her family barely knew. At 30, Crystal had finally found her footing after a difficult divorce. She'd moved to Phoenix years earlier, determined to prove she could build a life on her own terms. Those who knew her described a woman whose beauty was matched only by her generous spirit, the type who'd give a stranger the jacket off her back without hesitation. As a property manager in Arizona, she'd built a stable career while maintaining the warm, bubbly personality that made everyone around her smile. She had this way about her, a former colleague would later recall, very funny, always joking with everybody, but it was her kindness that really stood out. She was stunning on the outside, but it never interfered with who she was inside. Every summer, Crystal sent her children north to spend quality time with Josephine, maintaining those crucial family connections despite the 1,000-mile distance. This year seemed no different. After the kids' plane landed safely in Vancouver, Crystal called her mother with news of the spontaneous San Diego trip. It would be their last conversation. The next morning, Josephine's text messages went unanswered. Then another. And another. That sick feeling in her stomach, every parent's instinct that something is terribly wrong, began to grow. When her phone finally rang with an unfamiliar area, code 619, San Diego Josephine knew before she answered. "When I saw that phone number, I just knew," she would later say. "I hung up immediately and handed the phone to my husband. I couldn't bear to hear those words." Her husband called back. Within seconds, Josephine heard him say the words that shattered her world. "What? She's in a morgue?" On June 10th, 2016, a resident of the Rancho Mission Trails condos in the 7600 block of Mission Gorge Road noticed something disturbing, a trail of blood leading to his neighbor's doorstep. When he cautiously opened the cracked door and called out, the silence that greeted him was absolute. Inside, he made a discovery that would launch one of San Diego's most intensive murder investigations. Crystal Mitchell lay dead in the apartment, victim of what the medical examiner would determine was brutal strangulation, so violent it had fractured bones in her neck. San Diego Police Department homicide detectives arrived to find clear signs of a violent struggle. Evidence placards scattered throughout the garage and hallway marked a crime scene that told a story of desperation and violence. But amid everything they found at the scene, investigators quickly realized something crucial was missing: Crystal's car and her boyfriend. Within hours, detectives located Crystal's vehicle abandoned at San Diego International Airport. Security footage showed it had been left there shortly after the estimated time of death. The pattern was becoming clear: someone had committed murder and immediately fled. We realized pretty soon in the investigation that her vehicle was missing, which eventually led us to the San Diego International Airport, a detective explained, and the boyfriend was nowhere to be found. Raymond McCloud, bodybuilder, former Marine, and the man Crystal had trusted enough to spend a weekend with, had vanished. As investigators dug into McCloud's background, a chilling pattern emerged. This wasn't his first violent episode. Far from it. We noticed a pattern of behavior with women and violence, investigators revealed. McCloud had been previously convicted of domestic violence against his first wife in Phoenix, Arizona. He faced pending charges in Riverside County, California, where he'd been accused of attempting to strangle his third wife. The violence was escalating, the attacks growing more severe with each relationship. Security camera footage from the apartment complex revealed Crystal's final moments caught on camera. The CCTV showed her sliding down the wall, covering her eyes, standing up nervously to look behind her, then heading toward the parking lot elevator. In one frame, McCloud's hands were visible around her throat. It was footage so disturbing that investigators knew immediately they were hunting a brutal killer. He was strangling with his bare hands, a prosecutor would later explain. He was the weapon. Further investigation revealed McCloud had rented a car immediately after the murder and driven straight to Mexico. He'd crossed the border before authorities even knew Crystal was dead. The trail went cold at Tijuana. Back in Vancouver, Josephine faced an impossible task, telling her grandchildren that their mother was never coming home. But before she broke their hearts, she gave them one final gift from crystal teddy bears their mother had made for them before they'd flown north, each containing a recording of her voice. "Hi, my wee baby," Crystal's voice played from the stuffed animal. "Mommy loves you." At the funeral, Josephine bought a white casket and laid out colored markers. She let the children draw on their mother's coffin, write notes and letters, spend time processing the reality that Crystal was truly gone. "I needed them to understand that Mom is really gone," Josephine explained, tears streaming down her face. As weeks turned to months, Josephine, a former police detective from the island of Guam, watched with growing frustration as the manhunt for McCloud seemed to stall. She heard the official statements, saw the press conferences, understood the jurisdictional complications of an international fugitive, but understanding didn't ease her growing conviction that more could be done. "I just thought, you know what, something is wrong," she recalled. "I knew there's more that can be done." So Josephine Wenzel, grieving grandmother and former detective, made a decision that would change everything. She would find Raymond McCloud herself. What if Liam Neeson from the movie Taken was a sweet grandmother? That's essentially what Raymond McCloud was about to face, a mother with a very particular set of skills acquired over a career in law enforcement, skills that made her a nightmare for people like him. Josephine began waking at 3 in the morning every single day, searching every online record, combing through social media, reaching out to anyone who might have information. "Have you seen this man? Have you seen this man?" The question became her mantra. "I spent day and night combing through the internet, reaching out to people," she said. "I was looking for a needle in a haystack the size of a continent." Then one day, while browsing through what she described as shady websites used by federal agents, she stumbled upon something called geofencing, a tracking technique that creates virtual boundaries on a map and flags any social media activity containing specific keywords within that area. Basically what it is, you put a line around a map of where you want to search, she explained. You put in keywords, and any conversation on social media would come up in that area. Through methods she still won't fully disclose, likely skirting legal boundaries herself, Josephine accessed a geofencing network. Within weeks, she found her first real lead, a blog post from a backpacker who'd met an American man in Guatemala, matching McCloud's description perfectly. Josephine doubled down on Guatemala. She scoured social media posts, geotagged to the region. Then she found a TikTok video of a muscular man dancing aggressively with a woman at a club. She slowed the video, watching frame by frame, until the man turned his face just enough. "Oh my gosh, it's him," she whispered to herself, heart pounding. Josephine immediately contacted the U.S. Marshals, who dispatched a team to Guatemala. This was it. After months of searching, they'd found him. The team moved in, coordinating with local authorities. But by the time they arrived, McCloud was gone. Someone had warned him. Someone had tipped off a murderer that authorities were closing in, giving him time to vanish again. "By the time we got there, he was gone," Josephine recalled, devastated. "Someone came and warned him that I was looking for him, and he fled." That's when I started realizing this was not going to be easy. But the failed capture in Guatemala didn't stop Josephine. If anything, it intensified her determination. She began appearing in media interviews, documentaries, podcasts, anywhere she could spread McCloud's face and warn others about his danger. "If you see this man, please, he's conniving, he's charming," she pleaded in one interview. "This is how he got my daughter. Please don't trust him. He's dangerous. He's very violent." Her message to those who might be helping him was even more direct. "If you are hiding him, if you are protecting him, my daughter's blood is on your hands as well." As Josephine continued her investigation, disturbing reports began filtering back from Central America. McCloud wasn't just hiding, he was leaving a trail of victims in his wake. According to neighbors in one Guatemalan village, McCloud had been living with a Mayan woman. He would beat her routinely, witnesses reported. They could hear her screaming. She was beaten so badly, they don't even know how the woman lived. In bars and nightclubs across Guatemala, Belize, In El Salvador, people reported encounters with an aggressive American covered in tattoos, drunken rampages, drug deals, brutal fistfights, violent assaults, and reports of sexual violence. Each incident painted a picture of a man growing more reckless, more violent, more dangerous with each passing month. The more reports I got that he was hurting women, the more aggressive I became, Josephine said. He needs to be stopped. I am worried about the women out there. Josephine's fears weren't unfounded. A pattern was emerging. McCloud targeted vulnerable women, often from indigenous communities or tourists, people less likely to report violence to authorities, people who might not even know they were in the presence of an international fugitive. I don't doubt one bit that he's killed again, Josephine stated flatly in a television interview. Not with his record, not with his recklessness. I believe that the longer it takes to find him, the more powerful he thinks he is, and the more he would turn to murder. Josephine's relentless media campaign began to pay dividends. In 2019, America's Most Wanted aired multiple segments about Crystal's case. Josephine appeared on national television, looking directly into the camera with a message for her daughter's killer. My message to Raymond Samuel McCloud Jr. I'm never going to stop looking for you, never, until I bring an end to this. The publicity worked. Both the FBI and U.S. Marshals elevated McCloud to their respective top 10 most wanted lists. His face appeared on wanted posters from Mexico City to Panama City. Josephine had turned a regional murder investigation into an international manhunt. This man is a danger to society as a whole, a U.S. Marshal stated publicly. McCloud's history of violence will continue to escalate, and he will strike again, most likely against an unsuspecting woman. Law enforcement agencies across half a dozen Central American countries launched extensive campaigns. Josephine's geofencing network continued flagging possible sightings. The net was tightening, slowly but surely. Then, on August 28, 2022, a crucial tip came in. A woman at a nightclub in El Salvador saw a man she described as very creepy looking. Something about him triggered her instincts. She called in the tip to local authorities. The location: Sonsonate, a small city on the western edge of El Salvador. Josephine's morning routine never varied. After her grandchildren left for school, she'd sit at her desk with coffee and open her laptop, ready to comb through another day's worth of digital leads. The tip about El Salvador had given her renewed hope. She focused her geofencing network on Sonsonate, scrolling through every social media post from the region. Then she sought a photo of an emaciated white man standing before a whiteboard, teaching English to a group of children. He looked older, thinner than she remembered. His long sleeves obscured his arms, hiding the tattoos that would confirm his identity. She kept searching. A second photo appeared, the same man with other teachers. Then a third, this one from a crowded nightclub. The angle was clear, the man unmistakable. When I went through the pictures, I started screaming. Josephine recalled, "My God, this is him, this is him. He was in El Salvador teaching English." Raymond McCloud, wanted for murder, had been hiding in plain sight as an English teacher, surrounded by the very demographic he'd proven most dangerous to vulnerable women and children. Josephine immediately contacted the U.S. Marshals. This time, she had proof. This time, there would be no warning, no escape. U.S. Marshals obtained a federal warrant and coordinated with Salvadoran authorities. On the morning of the raid, they expected resistance. Intelligence suggested McCloud possessed an arsenal of automatic weapons and ammunition. The tactical team approached his residence with extreme caution. "Come outside, please," they called through loudspeakers. "Come to the door with your hands up." McCloud emerged without resistance. 6 years after murdering Crystal Mitchell, after fleeing across international borders, after leaving a trail of victims in his wake, Raymond McCloud was finally in custody. "Without you, he would not have been arrested," the lead marshal told Josephine. "That's what they told me." When McCloud was extradited back to San Diego, Josephine stood before a crowd of journalists with a message that resonated far beyond one case. "The number one thing I want everyone to know: yes, I got him, and he's not going to get away again." But capturing McCloud was only the beginning of Josephine's fight for justice. As the case moved toward trial, she discovered another obstacle: money. McCloud's wealthy parents had sent him $10,000 on the day he killed Crystal, money that funded his escape and 6 years on the run. Now they hired the best lawyers money could buy in San Diego, including celebrity expert witnesses. The defense team employed every delay tactic imaginable, postponing the preliminary hearing more than 10 times over nearly 2 years. They argued that Crystal's death was accidental, claiming she'd asked McCloud to choke her during some kind of sexual activity, a defense strategy that horrified prosecutors and victim advocates alike. It's really crossing a line to blame the victim, one legal expert noted. Because that's really what he's doing: victim blaming, victim shaming, and victim alienation. The prosecution presented devastating evidence to counter this narrative. Security camera footage showed Crystal sliding down a wall in terror, nervously checking behind her, clearly afraid. More footage from the elevator showed McCloud's hands around her throat, Crystal's face contorted in pain and fear. When you look at that video, this did not appear that she wanted this, prosecutors argued. They also introduced testimony about McCloud's prior violence. His ex-wife Rachel, whom he'd nearly killed in a separate incident, testified at the preliminary hearing about the night he tried to strangle her. "I unlocked the door and he was on top of her," a witness to that attack testified. She was gurgling, her lips were blue, she was no longer able to speak and was struggling to breathe. It took several people to actually pull the defendant off Rachel. They got him into the hallway and he still tried to go after her again, started strangling her again. The pattern was undeniable. Raymond McCloud was a serial abuser whose violence against women had escalated to murder. As the trial date approaches, now scheduled for January 2026, after yet another delay, Josephine faces her greatest challenge. She'll have to take the stand, sit in the same room as the man who strangled her daughter, and testify about the investigation that consumed 6 years of her life. In an October 2024 podcast interview, she expressed doubt about her ability to face him. But the host, crime journalist Sharon McCollum, reminded her of the strength she'd already demonstrated. "You are the X factor here," McCollum told her. "Your determination, your flat-out bravery for your child, you were fearless. That's how you got this capture." So, when you say, "I don't know how I'm going to fare," I do. You're going to walk in that place like the boss you are. You're going to look right at him, you're going to testify, and he's going to stay in jail for the rest of his natural life. Josephine faces the prospect of testifying with the same determination that drove her 6-year hunt. The trial in San Diego Superior Court will finally determine whether Raymond McCloud receives life without parole or faces California's death penalty for first-degree murder with special circumstances. "Someone asked me, when will I feel that we're done with this?" Josephine reflected. "Am I satisfied because I got him? No. I will be satisfied when he's convicted for brutally murdering my daughter and sentenced to life in prison. I will be just as involved in seeing this happen as I was in the search." Crystal Mitchell's story is ultimately about two women. One whose life was cut tragically short by violence, another who refused to let that violence go unpunished. Josephine Wenzel transformed her grief into something powerful, a determination that led her to master surveillance techniques used by federal agents, coordinate with law enforcement across multiple countries, and ultimately track down a killer who thought he was untouchable. "I was in so much pain that nothing else mattered," Josephine said. "I just turned my pain into power and nothing could stop me." Her grandchildren, now teenagers, are growing up knowing their grandmother fought for justice for their mother. They hear Crystal's voice in those teddy bears, see her smile in photographs, and understand that when someone you love is taken from you, you fight back with everything you have. "I keep her alive in their minds," Josephine said. "I want them to know their mother was strong, that she wanted the best for them. And I want them to know that Nana did everything possible to find this man and bring him to justice." As the trial date approaches, one question remains unanswered. Will 12 jurors see through the defense's claims and recognize Raymond McCloud for what he is: a brutal killer who has left a trail of victims across 2 continents? Josephine Wenzel has no doubt about the outcome. She tracked him across 6 countries, turned amateur detective into professional investigator, and refused to stop until justice was served. Now, she'll face him one final time, not as a grieving mother, but as the woman who ensured he would never hurt another daughter, another wife, another woman again. The trial of Raymond McCloud represents more than one woman's quest for justice. It stands as a testament to the power of determination, the strength of a mother's love, and the truth that some people, like Josephine Wenzel, simply refuse to give up, no matter how long the hunt takes or how far the trail leads. Crystal Mitchell's final moment was caught on camera, her terror immortalized in grainy security footage. But her legacy is something far more powerful: a mother who turned tragedy into tenacity, grief into justice, and ensured that her daughter's story would end not with a killer's escape, but with a grandmother's victory.